Welcome back to Stable Pod, a podcast where we host conversations with the individuals who are shaping the future of decentralized systems. I'm your host, Juan Esquivel. I'm joined by my co-host, Gustav Ehrentoft. How are you today, Gustav?
Feeling very good, thank you.
Today's guest is deep in the weeds of governance across various DeFi protocols. Thanos is the DeFi ecosystem lead at Keyrock, a prominent digital asset market maker and liquidity provider. Welcome to the podcast, Thanos.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here. Long-time listener since, first episode. Excited.
Awesome. I think a good place to start is by jumping into what Keyrock does and its mission.
Yeah, for sure. So Keyrock was founded in 2017. It started as spot market making. That's our core, bread and butter business. It has been since 2017, but of course, as the landscape changes in both centralized and decentralized, environments, we've been expanding, into like perpetuals, market making, into OTC, having an OTC desks, an options desks, our DeFi kind of desk. I mean, I don't want to call it desk necessarily because it's more than that. But we've basically been expanding to anything that has to do with digital assets. And it has been a great ride until now, to be honest. Of course, volatile as always. We try to make our best to make the markets liquid.
Awesome. Could you expand a little bit more about your role, Thanos, and what you focus on?
Yeah. So I've been at Keyrock for almost 2 years, I think. Started mainly focused as purely, a governance lead, let's say at Keyrock, where our idea was that we wanted to, to start being active in governance, and I think it's something we'll discuss deeper into why and how. But I started taking care of that, and then realized it's not only about governance; it's about DeFi as a whole and the ecosystem around, those DeFi layer ones, layer twos, and everything between it. And governance plays a role, of course, in there. But for having governance, you also need the tokens to be liquid first of all, which it's the starting place, and it's you need in those DeFi ecosystems you need the liquidity. So I'm basically managing also kind of our relationship with across multiple layer ones, layer twos that need that liquidity and need that bootstrapping mechanism for users to swap efficiently within AMMs, VMMs, perpetual dexes, sport order books in DeFi, and trying to be as active there as possible, because we do think DeFi and CeFi will be kind of 50-50 eventually,
I know your team has only recently gotten into, as you mentioned, governance. I think it's coming up on a year now, right? What was the initial motivations for venturing into it? Why did it wait so long to dive in?
Yeah, honestly, I know from, let's say, our VP of market making, Steph, that he always wanted to be active there since like 2019. It was just like not necessarily relevant back then. Essentially, it was, so early. Almost nobody was doing it. But he was always having an eye for it. And at some point, he realized, okay, it's essential for market makers that are active both in DeFi and CeFi to be there, not only just to have a voice, but also to be aware of the trends that are happening within the forums, within the DAOs. Because most of the time, something you are also aware of, right, is that what happens in governance affects majorly what happens, in the protocol eventually. And most people don't realize it until there is an actual, on-chain vote at the end of 2-month discussion. And they're like, oh, wait, what happened here? When did this go into vote? And then they're surprised. With the market being 24/7, anytime, you need to be aware of what's happening and be in front of the curve rather than following it. And that's kind of why I think Steph wanted also, to have someone looking at that and being responsible about it. And then on the other side, with the expertise we have in liquidity, in market making, and the concept of making those markets liquid, it's quite important in most scenarios in DeFi. and I think we can have a valuable opinion across those verticals to be able to be a voice, not necessarily an influence, because I don't think it's important to have an influence. It's more about having the diversified type of opinions that you have within DAOs to get a perspective of a market maker, which is not necessarily frequent, right?
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's you needed the structures, the governance structures to mature to a point to finally be able to jump in, and of course also you think you can leverage your expertise as a market maker and liquidity provider to help steer the protocols. Gustav, do you have something that you wanted to jump in with?
Yeah, I think it's also like, I think to the point of like back in 2019, I believe Maker was the only ones who was really doing governance in the beginning, at least, and it was just interest rates being voted on. So I think also like, especially within the last couple of years, we're seeing the decisions being taken having this impact that I think is what you mentioned you're interested in, right? From like Keyrock's perspective. One thing I was like curious about here is, so you kind of like mentioned, what you bring to the table, which is like the perspective of a market maker, right? What are some of the key things that you feel like, that you have observed lacking in the governance discussions that, to you might seem like, and maybe like something that's like obvious when you work with liquidity, which could be like lacking? Because I know also things around growth, fee switches and interest rate management and all of these topics that I can imagine impacts your business a lot is being discussed, right?
Yeah, 100%. For example, like I think a recent topic, right, the Uniswap fee suites proposal. It's definitely something that will impact LPs, and one of our offerings as a service, it's liquidity management, right, on Uniswap pools, but not only, across many layer 1s and layer 2s. If the fee switch is enabled, of course, it will actually impact our potential profitability on those liquidity pools, right? But there is a balance always. I do think it's also quite important that, Uniswap stakeholders capture some yield because of it, because the Uni token doesn't have any other utility right now. And I do think it's important to have that utility. So all those, type of, let's say, developments are quite important, and also sometimes do affect our business. But I think it's more easy for us to adjust on that, rather than, for example, the Uniswap DAO to say, okay, let's not turn on the fee suites because market makers or liquidity providers will be impacted by 1% in profitability or 2%. I don't think that moves the needle. Now, on a different topic, for example, what is coming on my mind is Go on Aave. I think it should be better planned. Like from last summer before it was launched, it could be way better planned, and it's kind of surprising that the DAO or even the other companies or Avara now as it's called didn't ask for the opinion of liquidity providers in general, because I'm sure other companies or the developers of the Go have a lot of knowledge around DeFi and liquidity, but at the same time, if you want a pegged stablecoin, you need some opinion from external parties as well. And it could be on the DAO, on the forum. You didn't need to have like a consultancy fee or whatever. It could be just tag us on the DAO. We are there. We'll provide our opinion and based on our data and everything. And yeah.
I think this touches upon like a point like so I mean, Thanos, I used to work at Maker, and I think like the earlier versions of DAI is quite similar to not the early versions, but like DAI back then is quite similar to kind of like the spot that Go is in now, right? And I think like whenever you have a stablecoin that's like struggling, there's like a lot of noise around you, and I think sometimes it can be difficult to kind of like break through the noise to like realize what you need. And I think another thing that the DAOs have just historically been really bad at is kind of like, if a problem arises, they ask inside the DAO or like look inside the DAO, and maybe not always even looking at everyone there, but just kind of like if there's no obvious answer or candidates within the DAO, they just kind of like, don't really know what to do. So I think like in contrast to like a normal company, where if you have a problem, you would go out in the market and look for someone to solve it. I think this is something a DAO is struggling at, right? I don't know if you have like a similar perspective on this, or if you see like maybe DAOs are getting more proactive now and like also reaching out to you guys, or like seeing you're present, and you know, I don't know if you've felt like an evolution there.
There is definitely an evolution, but it's not there yet, to be honest. When we started to be publicly active in governance last, I think, April last year, it was not anywhere near, like, let's say I would be asked once per month for an opinion, and I would, work internally with our teams to kind of see what's the data points and the result of the, of the question. And now it's kind of more frequent. I do think it's also affected by having better, price action as well. And, everyone generally being more active. But yeah, it still has a lot of space to grow.
When you first joined, you mentioned last year. What kind of reception early on did you guys get as a market maker? Like, was it? I mean, from the communities that you were going to start to participate in, was it like open arms, or like, how did they treat you guys?
In general, it was okay, I would say. I mean, we first started with Aave and Uniswap. We joined first Aave, and of course, like, before you even join Aave, you first need to know a bit what's happening on the DAO and how it works, right? And the frameworks around it. You don't just join blindly. And that was a learning procedure for sure. But we on Aave was okay. We didn't have any problems. I think it was quite positive, to be honest. We're also part of the Orbit program for a bit that was running, and you are also there, guys. Then Uniswap had the delegate race as well, which was a really nice initiative to to activate more delegation. I don't think we got any delegations from that race because we joined quite late.
Yeah, we neither.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was quite nice, to be honest. We tried also to be active on some other DAOs that we were trading on, or developing strategies like Perpetual Protocol and Bancor with their carbon product. But to be honest, it wasn't that active. So at some point we decided to just like pay less attention, because of course you have let's say Aave and Uniswap, which is extremely active, and then you have the other ones that are less active. So we prefer to stay there. But it was I don't have any complaints, to be honest. Of course, we kind of joined a bit before the llama drama on Aave, which was interesting. We didn't have the full context around that and needed to read upon like a lot of forums historically. And then the curve collapse, and yeah, it was a volatile summer.
I think you actually bring up like a pretty good point there, right? And it's something that we have experienced the same, right? Where you come to like a protocol, you review a protocol, and basically they're not really that active, right? So you basically end up rather than trying to go in and take the fight and push the activity, you kind of like divert your attention to the ones that where you feel like there is activity, the activity is reciprocated, and you feel like you can have an impact, right? And I think in this case, there's maybe also like a little bit of a lesson, because I think, just objectively, I mean, of course, I might be biased because of the work that we do and also the work that we see companies like you guys do. But I do objectively believe that we have like a positive impact on the communities that we allocate resources to and interact with. And I think like here, this is maybe like a byproduct of like, governance, where like governance is, by many people seen as like inefficient and this like headache you have to deal with as a protocol. But at the same time, you're also able to attract, an ecosystem which might, complement the things you're doing, right? And come with outside expertise. And I think for a lot of these protocols that pays, if anything, maybe a couple of $1,000 per month, it's really cheap actually to get to work with the caliber of companies that comes in sometimes, right?
Yeah, I would say the inefficiencies are there maybe sometimes for a reason, to be honest. I always get also annoyed with them, because I do like to move fast, but at the same time, again, there is a balance, right? And having, for example, three type of votes on Aave, maybe it's a bit too much, but at the same time, it creates that framework, where if something doesn't pass through temp check, the risk providers and everyone that is paid from Aave treasury isn't against, so they're more efficient in their work to then evaluate the RFCs and then continue to on-chain and be efficient there. So yeah, it's a balanced act, to be honest. I do think that governance efficiency can improve with if you have a lot of working groups with experts, because then you kind of consolidate, finding the results or finding the opinions within those working groups and then just presenting them up to the DAO and then having a vote about it with a data approach or with a qualitative approach. So yeah.
I do want to note that sometimes these, specialist entities that come into governance, they're more heavily scrutinized sometimes for how they vote, and as a delegate, sometimes they're like, "Oh, you're just self-serving." How do you navigate that as a market maker? So I do want to note that Wintermute is obviously another competitor in the space, and they're also very active in governance. So yeah, I'm just curious how your team handles navigating that and always keeping in mind the best interests of the communities that you are part of.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, Wintermute is a colleague in the space, I would call it, not a competitor. And they've been doing a great job in the governance side. I would say that when it has to come to a vote that, let's say, has a conflict of interest, the way we think about it, first of all, is, depends on the situation, of course, right? But for example, if we take Aave as an example, we have our own voting power on Aave. Like, we have 3,000 Aave that is ours from the treasury. So in that sense, if we vote something that is not in the best interest of Aave, it hurts us as well. If we have Aave on our treasury, we should be aligned that Aave should, appreciate in general as a protocol, which then would probably mean that Aave token price would be higher. So I don't think we are ever gonna vote in a manner that is negative to the DAO, because that affects the token as well at some point. Like, for example, if you take DYDX, right? DYDX having the staking mechanism with USDC is amazing, right? It has consistently for the last month or so over like 20% API. It's amazing for anyone to participate there and generate USDC yield. So, and then if we do have a conflict of interest, we'll just declare it, to be honest. We are not really in the governance side of things to make money or to make profits or extract value. We're just here to, to provide our opinion, show our face, be transparent about it, and, provide whatever feedback or opinions we have for people to consider. And if they don't want to consider it, then that's fine,
I think this is maybe like also like a good point is that I think you guys would probably still be categorized in some instances like a service provider, right? Because you do provide a service to some of the DAOs, whereas like most other service providers, including ourselves, we do have some tokens in some of the ecosystems we work at, but probably less than you. But you're probably one of the only professional governance participants, apart from very few VCs, but who actually comes in with your own tokens. Of course, you'll probably have some tokens delegated apart from this as well. But you actually have, an economic, alignment with the protocol, right? And most likely let's say, like your Aave position there would most likely be worth more if the token goes up compared to what you potentially would be getting in like a service provider relationship. So I think that is like a good point that you kind of like have that like check and balance in place already. So even with this in place, why do you think that there can be some scrutiny and skepticism about, market makers? What is like people's perspective on you guys? How do you feel like, when you engage?
I would come back to the service provider point, actually. In general, not just for DAOs, to be honest, we are focused on being like a service provider. Our core business is not prop, market making or trading. We're not really directional on anything, apart, of course, from our own treasury, of course. We are there to serve, token issuers, foundations, exchanges, and anything in between. So we have this mindset of service providing in general. Now, for DAOs in general, we are not necessarily looking to be providing a service to DAOs, honestly. Now, if they want, of course, if they want their token to have more liquidity and they want to engage us as a market maker, that's a service, right, to a DAO. But it's not our primary goal, to be honest, because usually those type of DAOs, they are extremely liquid. They don't need, market making services necessarily. And so we don't focus on that. I actually forgot your question. Maybe can you repeat that?
Yeah, I think it's more like like you guys are probably one of the few professional governance participants that has a big financial exposure to the protocols you participate in, because you hold a lot of tokens on the balance sheet. But I do feel and see that there's still like some skepticism about like the role of like a market maker. So I just wanted to know, like, how do you feel this, as a participant, do you feel sometimes that you are like under like a different scrutiny? I think we see a little bit the same with venture capital firms, like with VCs, right? There's also more scrutiny on kind of like how they engage. So I just wanted to know, like how do you feel this, or if you feel this at all?
I don't necessarily feel like it, and I don't really come up with it very often, to be honest. It's more frequent as crypto Twitter sentiment rather than anything else. And I mean, in our operations, we are delta neutral, market making, OTC, options, and etc. So, no matter what happens to the price, doesn't matter for us, to be honest. For our own treasury, yes, it matters, but that's a different conversation, right? That's why I wanted to focus on the service-driven approach, because we are there to be, let's say a 99% uptime on centralized exchanges with our clients. We are not there to extract massive profits by some type of, let's say, nefarious activity that crypto Twitter may think about. So I don't agree with the sentiment. And yeah, it's just not something we generally think about.
Yeah. I think unfortunately we have seen some firms operating as market makers having nefarious ways, which I think unfortunately spills over to teams like yours that is doing the right thing, right? So yeah, I guess that maybe it's just like the way that some people view it.
I mean, there is a difference between who is actually market making and providing a service, and who is actually just using market making algorithms or strategies to trade directionally. It's two different conversations. So yeah, everyone can be a market maker. If you deploy liquidity on Uniswap, you're theoretically a market maker, right? So just about how you see it.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Something we talk to guests about, and they bring up is governance culture. What you guys just described about like how people view you within the community, the different entities. I think sometimes there's kind of some PTSD or some like bad instances where they work with certain types of groups and they don't actually deliver. So I'm curious in terms of like, how does Keyrock think in terms of like the value that it brings? Like, what are the I know you share some comms in terms of like, these are our values. This is the type of thing you're getting from us as a team. I'm curious, like, is this a top priority for your team to really showcase the value you're providing for each of these communities?
Yeah, I would say so. It's just to show that we are part of the community. We're aligned with the DAO, and if the DAO succeeds, first of all, DeFi succeeds, because usually, let's say Uniswap DAO is successful, that is massive for DeFi as well. And then the protocol succeeds. So if we are trading on the protocol, for example, we are also, benefiting from that if the protocol is doing well. So it's just a symbiotic relationship,
So coming back to how Keyrock as a business views this arm of governance, like its activity, I'm curious, like, what are like the main value drivers that the company in this 1 year of its experiment actively engaging? What have been some of the the key things, the key takeaways, the value propositions that they've seen actually come about through this engagement?
Yeah, so I think it has been a massive year of like growing our DeFi activities in general, in tandem with governance, and actually kind of being recognized as someone that is there in DeFi and can assist, with the liquidity. So at the same time, having that kind of expertise and providing those opinions on the DAOs like Aave and Uniswap is something that we've noticed that most, teams and foundations and token issuers actually appreciate, because you are not just there to extract value; you are there also to help, right? So, for example, recently we actually were helping on the Solana side with Meteora. It's a dynamic liquidity AMM from the Jupiter team. And they have the stimulus plan basically for LPs to get some allocation of the token supply. And together with, I don't know, I think it was over like 20 other people that provided feedback over like a month of periods. We're just having weekly Discord calls, and just discussing what's the most beneficial thing for the DAO, but also for LPs to be there, for the Meteora, platform to grow and have more liquidity while also attracting more volume. So, and we of course assisted there from a kind of perspective on LP, to showcase how we kind of think, because to have LPs there, they have to be profitable or barely profitable, because of course, AMM LPing is not the most straightforward thing to be profitable, right? And so we're basically kind of, putting the devil's advocate opinion there to showcase how we would think if we had to, let's say, take $10 million and deploy it on Meteora, and what it would take for us to be there. And while at the same time, you have, let's say, the token holders of Meteora that are like, hey, I don't want to give too much of the supply because, of course, I'm diluting myself. But, there's a balance. Do you want liquidity providers? Do you want volume to grow on Meteora? Yes. Okay. Then you need a balance, right? So I think, it's about providing that opinion and expertise.
So is it safe to say the Keyrock team has found that it's a value and that you're going to continue to grow this part of the business?
Yeah, I mean, we are looking to be active in more DAOs. It's more a question of, like how many DAOs can you handle per person, because it's intense.
We can give you some feedback on that.
Yeah, I know. I can imagine. It's. I mean, right now we are mainly active in Uniswap, Aave, DYDX, and Meteora. We are gonna be in a few more when they launch their tokens soon. It's just about having the capacity to be active on all of them while being qualitative, right? Because we could be in, let's say, 50 of them, but then we wouldn't be providing the opinion we should be providing. It's we need more people basically.
Yeah. So I have I picked up something there. So basically, you work on Aave, Uniswap, DYDX, major DeFi protocols, I completely understand why you're there, right? So then you have this other one, Mateo, right? You call it, and then you say a couple of more when they launch the token. So has Keyrock started to kind of, because I assume those are the ones where you probably start talking with them because of you becoming a market maker for them when they launch the token, right?
It's adjacent. But at the same time, I mean, I can tell you specifically for Meteora, we are just amazed by the product and the team. I mean, it's the Jupiter team. It's the developers of Jupiter. I cannot praise them enough. If anyone knows anything about Solana, I mean, they're just chuds, in what they do. On Meteora, we're actually extremely impressed because we've been deploying Liquidity recently, and it has been doing almost close to $100 million of daily volume with basically 1 million of TVL, which is impressive. LP profitability is through the roof there. And the efficiency that Solana brings into that, right, with the speed and everything, is just amazing to see. So, yes, I mean, if we are there from the beginning, we probably also have an upper hand in potentially helping them with their liquidity. But at the same time, it's actually that we love the product and we are actually learning from trading in the product, right? Because if we learn how to be a profitable LP on Meteora, which is a dynamic liquidity model, then you can also transfer that knowledge to other dynamic liquidity models. So just also a learning experience for us.
Yeah, and also like I guess like when you don't come into a place like this where maybe you already know you want to work there from a liquidity standpoint, right? You like the product, you want to provide liquidity, you want to use the protocol, in form of your market making business, but then you can add your governance expertise as a bonus, right? It can become, I would say, like almost like a competitive advantage for you guys when you talk with these newer protocols, because all the DeFi protocols, they know at some day they have to decentralize, but no one knows how to do it, right? So, and it can be tricky to get the right people on board in the beginning, right? So it's interesting to see how you guys, as you said, it's not one or the other, it's adjacent, right? I think that's a really cool proposition to also help push the newer protocols into the right directions.
Yeah, and I actually think that because early on within DAOs, it's actually hard to get the participants to properly form a DAO, right? Because you either need the team actually to create the DAO and then kind of start pushing and decentralizing, or you need someone to take over, let's say an equivalent of Mark Zeller in Aave, and just run it through frameworks and make it as decentralized as possible, and have that established DAO structure then. But the problem and the beauty of DAOs is that at first it's just all over the place. You don't know what's happening. You have no idea who's gonna do what, and it's actually nice, but also at the same time it's chaos, right? So I think that's what we're looking to do with all the other DAOs that are up and coming in the next few months, to kind of be there. We already have that kind of knowledge and expertise from Aave, Uniswap, and others with all those frameworks. And I think just providing like a semi-decent structure, to be honest, will actually help all the users and the holders to go from 0 to 1 already.
Thanos, so we talked a lot about like the why and the motivations for participating in governance. We haven't touched on as much the how. For the listeners that may be interested in actually, getting involved, maybe they're a similar entity to Keyrock. Can you elaborate how Keyrock structures its governance arm? I think there's only one person, or there was one person, and it was you for a while. And if so, like, what are the potential like future plans going forward? Like, how do you envision this growing out?
Yeah. So it's been until now myself and my two other selves of not sleeping. But and we also have, with the support of our data team, I did have like some help there, in general, to form opinions and like collect data while also looking at external data. But it's been mainly been me. We are actually having a governance intern joining next 2 weeks, actually. So he's going to be helping me. For now, to be honest, that's the plan. I don't think it actually makes sense to have more people against in our governance team. It's just that it's like adjacent to what we do in DeFi, and I think, like, let's say both myself and the intern can play a role in both of those things. So I think for now that's the plan. Regarding which DAOs and how many, to be honest, I don't know if I can name them actually. So I'm gonna plead the fifth there. But I can count on my head at least 3 of them, like in the next quarter.
Yeah, there's a lot coming online soon, right, Gustav? We also get inbound, obviously, of course. So it definitely starts to become like you start to pick and choose where you actually want to contribute, because there's so many of them coming on, and you have limited resources to be able to actually effectively contribute. Gustav, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think it's also like, you want to be somewhere where, there's kind of like, an appreciation of the work that you do, right? You want to be in a place where your voice is being heard, and you actually can have an impact, right? If you feel like the community is like, it's often not the community, right? It's more, I would maybe more say the foundations or like the teams, they can sometimes have a little bit of a hard time, I think, like letting governance be and actually accepting and respecting the things that comes through governance and being open-minded, right? Because of course, like as a foundation, a lot of them still holds a lot of tokens, both directly in the treasuries, but also the team typically has a lot of vested tokens. So, if they want to block stuff or like shut down proposals, they typically can. And this is definitely something we see in a couple of DAOs we have been in, right? Where, basically you can just feel that like, stuff gets blocked, stuff is not allowed to pass. So you definitely want to kind of like figure out, what is the place where it actually, makes sense for like both parties, right, to be.
Yeah, I would agree 100%.
Yeah, totally. I hear you. So I'm curious, any plans for L2 governance? I like to ask this to everyone.
To be honest, I don't think L2s are a different beast on itself. And so I don't think we have either the capacity or we can bring that much value to be there. It's a full-time job almost to be just in one of them. So yeah, I don't have any plans for that.
Yeah, I hear you. Going forward for where you're engaged in, I'm just curious, like, so of course you vote, right? And I've seen your guys' voting record. But I've also seen when I was doing research for this conversation, I've seen that you've only there's a few proposals that you've contributed to. Does Keyrock look to create more proposals going forward? Like, I'm just curious to know more about your strategy going forward in governance.
Yeah. I mean, on existing DAOs that we are there already, it just depends on the gaps we see in the market. If we see that, for example, on Aave, there is an asset that is quite liquid and is missing from being listed on Aave, which then, makes Aave missing in potential revenues, we'll just make a proposal about it to potentially get it listed. We like, of course, to be active and propose something, but it's at the same time, it depends. And I don't, for example, I don't think we should be making a proposal about on the Uniswap DAO about underrepresented delegates that you guys did, because it's more something that's like, it's not our expertise, right? It's more of a social, philosophical, let's say, matter, which is, by the way, very important, but, it's not our expertise, so I don't think we should necessarily look into that to be active there. While if it has to do, let's say, with the LP fee suites and what parameters to put there, then of course there we can be way bigger contributor, but yeah, it just all depends. On future DAOs, to be honest, because I do think they need that kind of bootstrapping mechanism within the DAO, maybe will be, more like generic, let's say, and not necessarily focused on the liquidity side of things. But still, that's our main focus, to be there as like kind of a liquidity expert, to formalize, let's say, the parameters, the risk parameters, and the requirements that, let's say, a perpetual DEX need to have for users to trade on.
Yeah, I think something people don't realize is governance contributions is like there's a lot of different things. It's not just voting. There's you could help design certain things. You could help be part of a grants program, right? Be on a council. So yeah, I was just curious to hear more if like Keyrock is just trying to continue to just lend in their opinion when it comes to a subject matter that they're experts in, or were they trying to actually get deeper and maybe start contributing in some of the other things? Because what we found is, like you've mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, governance is very deep and involved in everything that's going on with the protocol. It touches almost everything. It enables almost everything. And that's something us as a team is trying to make people understand, that governance is crucial to make things go forward, and whatever the objectives of those communities are. I don't know if you have a take or response there.
No, yeah, I agree 100%. Like, for example, you guys have been crushing it, on that side with the proposals. Like, I think, the Uniswap DAO proposal about getting more voting power to the actual delegates that are active and are there every week has changed the DAO quite a lot. I think we've all noticed it on the forum. It has been way more, alive, let's say, in the last 3 months, and it's good to see. Same with UADX, on Aave as well. Yeah, main examples.
Cool. I think that's a good place to wrap, gentlemen. Any final thoughts or comments as we wrap about anything, Thanos?
I'll bring it back to you, actually. What's Stable Labs' plans, in the next quarter, let's say?
Yeah, we're working on like a lot of different things. We are building out kind of like a productivization of some of the stuff that we're doing. So we're building out a an analytics product where we're looking to create a bigger and better way of understanding the different decisions and the impact we have in protocols, right? I think, for example, like you said, this thing about like Uniswap, we did this kind of like redelegation to the most active contributors there, and I think something like this, like you said, like we can feel the difference, we can feel the change. I want to be able to show that and prove that, and this is basically like some of the things that we're able to do with what we're building. So this is something we're starting to implement in a couple of the protocols where we're working. So I think that's like at least my biggest focus right now. And then we are like in almost 20 protocols. So I think in all of them stuff is going on. So yeah, and then I also just kind of like want to note here that I think it's something we're going to see a lot more in the future, right? Like more and more companies, opening their eyes for how beneficial it actually can be to have someone like working for them and who has the finger on the pulse, who understands the ins and outs of what is happening, and who don't just see it once it's going to the vote and people shout about it on Twitter, but who actually understand the processes, right? Because I think this is something we see a lot, everything that happens until it gets to the voting stage is just not accounted for. And another thing also is that then we see you see like Aave, they have like the temp check and the final voting, and Make has the same also like temp check and then executive vote. And sometimes when stuff passes a temp check, Twitter is always going crazy there because they don't understand, that it actually has a long way to go yet. So just in general, I hope that we also see people just understanding more, some of the intrinsic things that are happening here.
You know what? The only time that it was actually accurate regarding crypto Twitter sentiment was recently with Erin's post from Uniswap Foundation on the fee switch turn on. I think that was the only like exception to like, oh wow, here we go. Versus all the other crypto Twitter type of like Aave will list whatever token and you have the block and the CoinDesk covering it, and it's a temp check. But I think that's the only exception I can think of in the last probably year. Yeah.
That proposal is very controversial. So we'll see a lot of interesting conversations happening in the forums. But yeah, I think at Stable Lab, and especially with this podcast, something I like to always say is that it's important for us to showcase and to teach each other and others, and that's why we like to bring on guests that are actually doing the hard work. A lot of this work people don't realize how much it takes, and so that's why I like to bring on the faces that are actually deep in the trenches, so we could get more participants, because more participants means more decentralization, which is something that we of course highly value. So thank you so much for joining us, Thanos. We really appreciate your time. It's been fun.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Gustav.
Thank you very much, and appreciate you coming, Thanos.
We'll see everyone on the next episode of Stable Pod.